So ayun, let's start na. So we want to welcome you guys to the fourth K8SUG Meetup. And thankful kami na ang dami pa ring familiar faces. Yung mga bagong faces, so let's just get a view of the ground. Sino dito yung mga who are the first time attendees for this meetup? Okay. Dami pala. So, yung mga naka-attend na last time, sorry, hindi na kayo kasama doon sa food. Ayok lang. Pero, ayun, thank you for supporting us, and later again, we will be having our networking session after the first talk by Mark. And for all that, we would like to introduce our group again, lalo na doon sa mga bago. So, I'm calling on Miss Kay to introduce K8SUG to you guys.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth meetup of K8SUG, where we have awesome speakers. Ayan sila. Si JP Alcala, who will be talking about admission webhooks, the DevOps engineer's best friend. And we have also Mark Oliver Cahinde, who will talk about eliminating DevOps Toil with Kubernetes automation. So very interesting topics, especially if you're looking to a DevOps role, you're in a DevOps role or passionate about Kubernetes. And so we are a volunteer-led group, so we don't have paid staff to do this, but we encourage everyone to take photos of the events. And if you want to share the photos you're taking, you can share it by this QR link. It goes to a OneDrive, and then we can use that to share in our LinkedIn for other attendees. And so, what is K8SUG? So, our mission is basically this, which is to empower the community to learn about Kubernetes. So, not just Kubernetes, but also AI, and anything related to CNCF or the Cloud Native Foundation. And our goal is to empower the community to learn faster. We also share certification vouchers so that you can get certified in a cheaper way and you can grow stronger in your career. So we are a global user group. It started with K8SUG Singapore back in September 2022. And in the Philippines, we started just recently, last September 2024. And so far, we're trying to sustain the community. So thank you also for supporting us by attending here. And hopefully we see the current attendees to be the future speakers so that you can also share on things you're working on and empower the community more. Yeah, so again, these are today's topics. From our sponsor, from CloudBridge, we have Mark Oliver Cahinde, who will talk about the eliminating DevOps Toil with Kubernetes automation. And we also have JP Alcala, who will talk about admission webhooks. And we'd like to thank our sponsors. Without them, we don't have a meetup. For AWS, our long-term partner, with providing us location for free so that we can have the meetups regularly every month. And we also have CloudBridge. So thank you, Mark, for partnering with us also for this meetup to for sponsoring our food. And we also have CodeCloud, our long-term partner also for providing us learning materials for Kubernetes. So this is our team. As I mentioned, the K8SUG started in Singapore. So it was started by these three guys. You might have seen Yong Kang. He's very active in LinkedIn. And these are the two other founders of K8SUG in Singapore. And from the Philippines, we also are powered by 9 leads who are currently recently volunteering for organizing these meetups and getting us all together to talk about Kubernetes. And we also started onboarding a few students and professionals who also volunteer. So you might see more leads soon in the future meetups. So we'll also like to share about our upcoming events. Right now we have the fourth meetup for the Philippines, and across the globe we also have incoming meetups for February and March. And I believe you can join some of them in Zoom. They publish it on their meetup page, and you can also view the recordings in YouTube. And so we also like to share about the Cubestronaut program. So since our goal is to make everyone certified in a cheaper way, we encourage those who are certified to donate their 50% of vouchers, and then that those 50% vouchers will be shared to the community. Yeah. So that's one of the goals of the group is to empower the community. And the Cubestronaut program is actually if you have all the 5 certifications for Kubernetes, you get the blue jacket. So I believe one of our Cubestronaut talked about this in the first meetup. I think that's the next slide siya. Ayan, si Romar Cablao. He was the one of the first speakers during our first meetup. And then right now we already have 2 Cubestronauts in the Philippines. So we also like to recognize Francis Arzadon. I believe nung around November siya naging Cubestronaut din. And we're still waiting for the first girl from the Philippines to join the Cubestronaut program. So if anyone is aiming for that certification and the Hall of Fame. Ayan. We'd also like to share about the KubeCon Europe. So, kung sino yung mga gusto magpunta dun sa KubeCon is the biggest convention for Kubernetes. You can also get, we're sharing yung code if your company is willing to sponsor you to attend that event, you can use that codes to save 20% for the ticket. So I believe yan yung mga prizes. If you're interested, you can just snap a photo. Yan. And then we'd also like to share, if you haven't already, please follow our LinkedIn where we always share yung mga voucher codes. Madami sila. Ayan. So we also have the astronaut program. For those who are already certified sa AWS, you might be familiar with the golden jacket, where if you achieve all the certifications of AWS, you get the golden jacket. And this is the unofficial recognition for that, the astronaut program. So, yan. We have 2 new certifications, if you're not yet aware, the AI practitioner and the machine learning engineer. So it takes around 15 na ba yan? 15 certification before you get recognized as an astronaut. Yan. So I believe si Yong Kang yung first who claimed the astronaut. Yan. And then if you want to continuously support the community also, there's various ways you can volunteer as a speaker or a volunteer or as a sponsor. If your company is also supportive of the community, you can fill up the links here. The QR code takes you to a Google form link where you can volunteer. If you want to be a speaker, we usually have 2 speakers per event, one from the community and one from the sponsor. And then you can also volunteer yung mga nag-help lang for the meetups, and then you can also be a sponsor to fund the food para people keep coming and sharing with the community. And you can also follow us on various pages. And I think yun na. That's it. So I'll turn this over now to Chris for the next part.
Thank you for that introduction, Kate. So, without further ado, let's start with our first speaker. He is the Asia Pacific Technical Director and Senior Solution Architect for CloudBridge. He mostly works with AWS, delivering solutions for customers, and he will discuss Kubernetes automation tooling today to help balance performance and cost optimization. So here's Mr. Mark Cahinde to give our first talk.
Pero sige, hindi ko skip na lang. Ano pa
Hi everyone. Good evening. How are you? Are you doing good? Okay. So let's start. So our topic for today and the talk that I'll be giving is about Kubernetes automation and how it can lead us to performance and cost optimization. So this topic is brought to you by Cast AI, the number one intelligent Kubernetes automation platform, and also CloudBridge, your trusted AWS advanced consulting partner. So we'll talk about these two later. So I'm your speaker today. So I'm Mark. I am an AWS certified architect. So my work revolves mostly around AWS solutions. So I've been working with CloudBridge for 4 years already. And before that, I was part of service engineering team ni Maya for 5 years. Currently, I'm multi-hat. So as you can see, um, solutions architect ako and at the same time, the technical director for APAC. And I serve clients ni CloudBridge globally. So I scope, design, and implement and also hand over solutions to customers that mainly focus on larger migrations, DevOps designs, implementations, and AWS best practices. So in terms ng Kubernetes experience ko, it's not very deep. So medyo dalian nyo lang yung tanong mamaya. Please lang. Pero before I left Paymaya, it was then when we started adopting Kubernetes for our money movement architecture. So it's not very deep, but I'm very familiar with it. And this slide deck that I'm giving right now, this is from Cast AI. So through our partnership with them, they supported us with the materials that we are going to present today. So yeah, let's do a quick poll. No, so how well do you know Kubernetes automation? So let's maybe show of hands. Sino ang very familiar with Kubernetes automation around here? Raise of hand. Okay, so sino? Sir JP, hello. So sino ang somewhat familiar or familiar with Kubernetes automation? And then finally, sino ang walang idea with, okay, sige. Thank you for participating. So with that being said, no, we say that Kubernetes is easy, isn't it? So do we agree with that? So for most here in attendance, siguro we can say that it is easy. So Kubernetes is an orchestrator and it is doing a lot for our environment, no? But it does not care with other tasks, especially yung day two task, yung mga day two operation topics. So that's why we have this one, the Cloud Native Foundation. It's a large ecosystem and it's always growing and getting stronger. So the tools that we see here right now, this really sets us up for success. So maybe we can say that Kubernetes is just our starting point, but it is a container orchestrator and nothing more. So we need to look at these toolings right here. Which one is the right for our journey? How to bring them together to make it work and more integrated. And of course, to avoid having a big zoo of toolings. because it can get easily a little bit wild. And it brings us here, So how would you handle the zoo? So you see, we have here two options. So definitely we can use our command line ninja skills. So do you agree ba that when you see someone very focused, very specialized yung tooling niya sa paggamit ng command line, it's very amazing to see, right? So meron akong colleague dati sa Maya. Siya yung technical manager right now sa service engineering, and siya gumagamit siya ng Vim, samantalang kami mga kasama niya VS Code lang, naka-IntelliSense pa. So when you see that kind of person, it's really amazing, no? But ultimately, most of us here, what we want is automation, the use of automation. And when we have it, potentially all we can see would be rainbows and unicorns, di ba? So it has been a common thing for a long time already. And of course, still we can't avoid some people seeing this as a threat. Do people still have this fear that automation kills their job? Do you agree with that? Anyone here? So, of course, we know that this isn't true. Automation will not kill the job. In many cases, automation opens up a lot more of opportunities for us. So it's not about doing the same amount of tasks with less people, but it's more about being able to do more and to do it better. Automation allows us to scale. So what do we even usually automate? It's the boring task. It's yung legwork ang usual na in-automate natin, right? So what was the saying again, di ba, about automation? Never spend 10 minutes on a task when you can spend 10 hours failing to automate it. Pero joke yun, di ba? Yun yung notion nila na we spend too much time automating for something na mabilis lang naman gawin. But really, if this particular task, this 10-minute task, you do this 50 times a week, isn't automation worth it? No? So we always try to automate stuff, the boring stuff, and to free up time for the interesting part. So that's what we want to hear. Definitely yun ang totoo. So this is true inside Kubernetes and outside Kubernetes. So we want the same approach everywhere. We want to see it everywhere. It doesn't make sense na we start an automation approach or journey for Kubernetes clusters and then stop doing it for the workloads or vice versa. So that is the key for automation. If we start with automation, we can't do manual changes. Otherwise, we'll stare at something like this. Ganyan ba yung CI/CD pipeline ninyo? So hopefully not, no? So we don't want it looking like this. So I myself am guilty of tweaking something temporarily outside of an automated environment. And ano ang result nun? So in the end, headache. It's getting hard to track. In the end, it doesn't promote the efficiency that we're looking for. Our core takeaway is that if we start the journey with automation, we also complete it with automation. So let's try and scope that wider topic ng automation into only about Kubernetes. So here we have a more generalized list of automating in Kubernetes. So it's more of a guidance really, which we definitely know as best practice. Firstly, we should always use a version control system like Git. So our configurations, our scripts, everything we use for the automation, it should be there. So what's not in Git does not exist. So that's the main rule. When we want to change anything in our environment, we have to change it there. Next, automate the full chain. So as we discussed earlier, it doesn't make sense when we stop at any point. Third of all, I think the golden rule na na-experience natin when we start learning how to code, right? Keep it simple and stupid, right? So make it as easy as you can. So of course, we can make it as complex as well, to cover a lot of bases. But you shouldn't be the only person that knows how it works. Gusto niyo bang tawagan kayo on a date night, on a Saturday night, when something fails because you're the only person who knows how it works? We don't want that, of course. And then finally, never do manual tweaks in an automated environment. Again, our key takeaway for this one, for the first session or first phase is this one. So our first phase talks about Kubernetes automation as something that reduces effort, it reduces the manual tasks and the time spent. But on the other side, we also want to be efficient. And what does that mean? So efficiency can also mean saving money. So Kubernetes, public cloud, and then Kubernetes na nasa public cloud, it has been around some time already, right? And it is quite common na. But sometimes, especially when we don't have proper understanding of the costs of running resources in the cloud and workloads in the cloud, it can get easily out of hand. So the elasticity that the cloud is providing us can be a double-edged sword that can leave you looking like Charlie here. I don't know if you're watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but hence, we need to make sure that what we are operating is cost sensitive, cost efficient, and in the next phases, we will learn how automation can help us maximize the elasticity of cloud. So let's kick off this particular next phase, looking at the tools at our expense to achieve a more efficient Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so let's start with infrastructure. And let's start thinking about how our cluster looks like. No? Foremost, what is costing money in the cloud? Infrastructure. So yung mga computes, your storage, network traffic, all of this cost you in the cloud. We know that already, no? So initially, our focus would be around your compute, your bare metals, your virtual machines, basically your Kubernetes nodes. And quickly going back, no, we said that the big benefit of using the cloud is yung elasticity niya, right? How do we even utilize this? So let's further take a step back and remember about automating from start to end. So imagine a situation where you are starting your automation journey using infrastructure as code like Terraform or configuration management tooling like, for example, Ansible. So when you provision these resources and infrastructure in the cloud, you set or you pin a number of nodes or the size of your nodes. So what happens when your time needs to scale this? Your DevOps engineer comes in, update nila yung code, and then run Terraform apply. Hopefully, you have a pipeline, infrastructure pipeline at this point already. But after that, you have already scaled in the cloud. You have additional nodes, you have bigger nodes, and that sort of thing. But of course, we know as we are discussing this topic about automation, this is not the way to go. No? So that's why we start to look at tooling na pwedeng ma-access natin. And for our first one, it is a nifty built-in feature of Kubernetes called Cluster Autoscaling. Okay, so as many of you here definitely know, the native tooling from Kubernetes allows cluster to automatically add or decrease nodes based on demand. So in a cloud, we call that horizontal scaling. So the logic behind this is what? How does it happen? So Kubernetes scheduler will be checking, okay, right, can I place these pods somewhere? I have a new pod. Can I place this in whatever node that I have? And then it comes to understanding that perhaps there is no remaining capacity to place the pod in. So the Kubernetes scheduler will raise an autoscaler, letting the cluster autoscaler know that it's time to create a new machine to place the pod in, of course. So in the same manner, when the application shrinks or the usage and demand for it shrinks, the pod count potentially also decreases, and cluster autoscaler takes care of the nodes. But here's the kicker for that. I'm very happy tayo because that is a default built-in tooling. But the kicker is that for this case, it's important that we consider a bin packing solution. So why is that? So what is bin packing? Bin packing solution in Kubernetes allows your pods to be placed in nodes that make better use of its resources. So bin packing, it is a decision that Kubernetes will never do. It is a decision that it will never take and say that we need to move pod E from node 2 to node 1 to free up some resources in node 2. Kubernetes scheduling does not work that way. So instead, it can reschedule the pod when certain conditions are met to move it to another node. So for example, if there are events like node failure, resource constraints, or when you explicitly define pod affinity rules to influence placement. So that's why it's important na magkaroon ng bin packing solution that sits on the cluster that checks which pods can be moved from one node to another to free up resources and free up nodes, such as what we see here. So we have node 1, we see node 1 underutilized, the one and below. Bin packing solution can come in and moves pod E and pod F from node 2 to node 1, since there is available capacity on node 1. So with that, node 2 is now removed. This is a low-hanging fruit for automation, for automating your cluster. So what is the impact of this low-hanging fruit, we say? So here we see two graphs that are actually a bit self-explanatory already. So we see that the blue line is the CPU provision, while the yellow line is the CPU requested. It's also valid to compare the different Kubernetes infrastructure autoscaler solutions out there. So we have open source ones like Carpenter. We have native ones like Kubernetes autoscaler, cluster autoscaler. And then we have commercial offerings like Cast AI. So for these tools, scaling is an easy task. Madali lang yun. So, but we also need to scale in fast enough to unlock cost optimization. Now, going back here, what we see on the left side of the deck, there is a potential, right, to be better. This one, left side, nakaharap nyo, right? There is a potential to be better, to which after bin packing solution comes in and optimizes your infrastructure, we see the gap closing, hence the after optimization graph here. We can all agree that this is a more successful infrastructure autoscaling, right? And so another challenge that a lot of Kubernetes users is facing is knowing which instance type are the right ones for your cluster. A very quick question, so maybe I can give a prize later today, but who here can tell, kahit ballpark lang, how many instance types are available in AWS Singapore region right now? 5. Wala lang, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, sige, shy type kayo. Anyway, the correct answer is 665. There are 665 instance types sa Singapore region in AWS alone. Imagine that. So with that amount, is it possible for someone to have a full picture of these instance types? So siguro yung mga master natin sa AWS, yan, siguro si Sir JP, alam niya yung sagot dyan. Pero for an ordinary techie like me, it is going to be a lot harder. So what do I do then? So common approach that people do is we choose common instance families from AWS. Yung mga alam natin. So there is the general purpose M5, there is the compute optimized C5. We know na yung A in T3A is AMD, yung I sa C6i is Intel, yung G for T4G is Graviton, and then that's it. So the result is people will have standard sets of instance families that they are using. So maybe dalawa, tatlo they use for infrastructure auto-scaling. So this itself, it's not very efficient, di ba? Maybe there are other completely different instance types available in the region that you can use. Maybe something that is more effective based on the CPU and memory ratio, price and performance ratio. But since we don't know all of it, so we probably miss the chance to maximize our efficiency and probably create a lot of overhead sa cluster, which, by the way, we have to pay. So that's why it's important not to downplay this. And the easiest approach is we need a solution to know about the available instance types in our region that can do an auto-scaling action check, how much resources are requested by the application, and which instance type is the match. And then what is the best price that I can get it or pay for it. So talk about the differences in pricing models in cloud. So I think we are quite familiar with this already, but I think most of us know the importance, and the key information that we get from this graph is that the comparison. And one thing is sticking out here or not sticking out dahil nasa baba siya, which is spot. Spot instances can give you up to 90% savings, di ba? That's great. So what if gamitin na natin? What if we use spot instances for all of applications? But should we really do that? So is there like a problem with spot? Yes and no. So as we know, spot instances, there are normal VMs, there are normal virtual machines, but hyperscalers like AWS, they have a lot of compute surplus. So lying around, and they sell spot instances to meet 100% utilization ng compute na meron sila for that region. But what happens if someone comes in and is willing to pay on-demand price? AWS, the hyperscalers, they take your spot instances away. They terminate it because there is someone that can pay on-demand pricing. AWS and Azure, they give you 2-minute warning before shutting down your instances, your spot instances. For GCP, they only give you 30 seconds. So spot instances is it still the right pricing model for your workloads? Siguro there is a hesitation already, but if you're persistent and you see the value in savings of using spot, then that's great. So spot can help you run very, very cheap clusters. We know that. But your workload needs to be ready for this type of interruption that we're talking about. So your workload needs to tolerate that spot interruption anytime. If you have a stateless application which has multiple replicas, so it sounds like it's a good idea to use Spot for this, right? So I agree on that. So as an example, you have 3 replicas, anti-affinity defined. So when one spot gets terminated, one spot instance gets terminated, you still have 2 replicas. You don't experience downtime. A new spot instance is going to be provisioned soon, and the third replica is going to be scheduled, and then happy days. No? Stateful applications, on the other hand, they are a little bit trickier. but it should be fine as long as you don't store your state locally. In the end, though, there should be a risk calculation that we should do when we consider spot instances for our workloads. And it shouldn't also be a black and white decision rin. So you can run in mixed mode. So an idea that I've heard is that you can use mutating admission webhooks to tweak Kubernetes scheduler to make sure na 3 replicas, 2 running in spot, 1 in on-demand instance. So whatever happens in your spot, you don't experience downtime. So we'll see later dun sa talk ni Sir JP about mutating admission webhooks. But there is more about spot. So the price changes during this life cycle. So puro memes yung slides, no? Hindi ako gumawa niya. Anyway, the price changes during its life cycle. So we should be aware of this. We should be aware of that price changes. We should be able to monitor the prices and be aware if the price drifts and instances could be more expensive to use. So yeah, let's close this phase at this point. Our key takeaway is that we use infrastructure autoscaler solutions and use spot where it makes sense, where we can tolerate the interruption or build a way to handle it better. For example, tolerating it on the application level. Anyway, your pods are always going to move from one node to another anyway. So it's always important to consider interruption, right? So it doesn't make sense if you have a single pod application that doesn't has no potential for scaling or replica. It's only running on single pods. Why even consider run it in Kubernetes? So might as well do the next step and expect the interruption and make it more tolerant. So for our next phase, let's look at the solutions that we can do at Kubernetes level in terms of automation. So what automations we can do within the workloads? Kubernetes provides HPA and VPA to balance workloads. So these are two key built-in features for workload scaling. So what happens? HPA, or horizontal pod scaler, adjusts the number of pod replicas based on CPU or memory utilization or maybe a custom metric that you currently use. So it helps you achieve a more dynamically managed workload depending on your traffic pattern. So as it fluctuates, HPA reacts. So in our visual example here, we see 2 pods running and HPA realizes that usage has increased. And if we have it defined in our configuration, HPA will decide to increase the number of replicas automatically so the load can be handled. In the same way, when load decreases, HPA will shrink the set, saving resources and also potentially saving us money. So in short, HPA, scale out, scale in. On the other hand, VPA is more about adding resources to the pod. So that is vertical pod autoscaler. It automatically adjusts the CPU and memory request on the pod based on actual usage. So this ensures that workloads receive the necessary resources without excessive over-provisioning. On this one, VPA, it's scale up and then scale down. So we see from the get-go, Kubernetes gives us the tools already to make our workloads more efficient. And efficient is the keyword here, So our co-presenter, Cast AI, did a benchmark of 4,000 clusters. In the end, they gathered the results and show that only 13% of CPUs end up being utilized within the cluster. So how did this happen? There are multiple factors at play. So we have, number one, potentially we have wrongly configured the infrastructure autoscaler. We use the wrong instance types, leaving us with a big headroom of capacity that we don't use but had to pay. On the other side, we have two highly defined requests. Mostly, the requests for pods are 5 times higher than the application really needs. Why is that? No? So mostly teams have no clear processes of how to define requests, how to observe this, and how to refine them. Usually we fall under fire and forget. Bahala na. Tumatakbo na. So we need to unlock this problem. So we need to think about how requests and usage work in Kubernetes. Kubernetes relies on requests, right? So the scheduler uses that request information to make valid decisions where to place a pod in a cluster. And on the other side, every auto-scaling solution needs a request to make valid instance selection then to see how much resources does it need, which instance type is going to be added to the cluster, that sort of thing. That's why it's important that we check the requests and monitor our usage. So you see in this example, my request is much higher than what I am really using. And so we can use this data right here that we have to arrive to a right sizing recommendation. That is, we take our usage, we add some buffer, and we make that our new request. All that's data, all the delta that is left between the recommendation and the requested, that's wasted resource that we had to pay. It's a waste of efficiency. So let's take a closer look doon sa automation options within Kubernetes workload. So how does VPA work? So we start with a pod with one CPU request and 1.5 gigs of memory request. So we also have VPA running in the same cluster. When suddenly the application's usage has peaked. So may it be CPU or memory, but Kubernetes is observing this metric, and VPA is observing closely and realizes that this pod gets pressured. So VPA comes into the rescue and it will do the scaling for us. So from the original smaller one, it will create a larger one. If I recall it correctly, so ang in-place request and changes on the fly in Kubernetes is still an alpha feature. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir. Pero this one, if it's still an alpha feature, we need a feature gate in order to use it. So pwede yun for vanilla Kubernetes clusters, but for clusters in the cloud like EKS, AKS, GKS, it imposes a challenge. But until then, as long as the node has enough capacity, VPA can have that larger pod and then terminate the older pod to serve your request. So there's going to be a restart. VPA works in both directions. So it has the same story. So if the VPA has the possibility to size the pod down, it will start a new one with smaller resources and then kill the older one. Right. Now let's try and switch how HPA works. So we have a replica count, right? And we have HPA and it is observing the application. And of course, we add some rule set here where, say for example, we tell HPA that if CPU usage is more than 60%, then we scale out to handle the workload. So HPA detects this and will increase the replicas. And yeah, that's it. So the key difference here, based on what we've seen, is that VPA needs to restart the pods, no? If we want to apply for a change. HPA is changing the replica count, so new pods are going to be added. So with that in mind, now that we understand how HPA and VPA works, no? So sounds awesome, right? So through Kubernetes native support, we made our cluster already more efficient. But so now we can now relax, we can let the magic happen, yan, hayahay na, but can we really just leave it like that and have both enabled in our cluster, do you think? Kubernetes documentation tells us that VPA should not be used alongside HPA on the same metric for that same workload. Why is that? Let's try and understand, no? So we already understood that VPA is checking the request versus usage and tries to bring that gap closer together. So if we look closely, we see that a usage of 40% on this one, and VPA scales that down, no? So from this one to this one. And we see here that it has reduced the pod. We are more efficient. Hooray, hooray. But on the other side, we have the HPA also monitoring CPU, who's gonna want to scale this out since we have 60% CPU utilization. So what does it mean? HPA will trigger out the scaling event, and as it tries to get the CPU under 60% usage, pero all of our pods by default will start at 80% utilization na because of the VPA. This means that VPA is happy, but HPA goes crazy because it's not able to fix it. If you don't have a limit on this, or if this isn't mitigated or corrected, you'll end up with a lot of pods and higher costs. Okay, so what's our key takeaway for this? So we know, and most probably has proved this in our experience with Kubernetes, that VPA and HPA can be used together naman talaga, as long as the settings are not conflicting. Just like we have shown there, no? So on the other side, we can use separate resource metrics. For example, for VPA, we use it to scale only CPU and memory. And then for HPA, we use custom metrics. So we can potentially use event-driven autoscaler like KEDA to scale on messages in a queue or scale on traffic in the ingress controller. So there are commercial solutions like Cast AI that can do both of those. So it will allow us to do real-time CPU and memory optimization over a few clicks and then over a few days of monitoring and looking at it this way. But more of them in a little bit. Okay, lastly, we have talked about requests, but definitely you also have limits in mind for these pods. So why should we care about limits, really? And what does it mean for us in the end to optimize limits and requests? Let's try this visual example again. So here we see two nodes. We have 1 gig free memory on node A and 3 gigs free of memory in node B. And then looking at the middle, we have a pod request for 1 gig and a pod limit of 3 gig. So do you think which particular node the Kubernetes scheduler will fit our pod? So definitely our Kubernetes scheduler, we say that both nodes are possible. Diba? So mainly because the Kubernetes scheduler is only looking at the request. So because of this scheduling logic, Kubernetes does not care about limits. It's only looking for requests, and since we have 1 gig request and free for both, it considers it's a match. But requests are just a starting point. So it's a placement value. So it's what we configure or say we need for the application to run. So that is request for us. But limit, it sets the ceiling on the maximum amount of resource the application can consume. So what happens when the pod consumes more than its request? Because our limit allows us to do that. So for CPU, most of the time, it can be tolerated. No? CPU is elastic. So if we have more CPU than what is available on the node, we experience throttling, but ultimately it still works. The problem is with the memory. So memory is a static resource. So if our pod just consumes 1 megabyte more than its request, but this same 1 megabyte isn't available on the node, Kubernetes directly kills your pod. So that is what we know as out of memory kill. Further on this, we need to avoid big deltas between our request and limit, since there is no guarantee that the requested resources is going to be available on your nodes. So it will depend largely kung swerte ka sa Kubernetes deployment mo if this will work. Kubernetes can schedule this somewhere if you have big packing solution in your cluster, as its goal is to make your cluster as small as possible, and it's just looking for requests, not limits. Hence, consider your requests and limits. Think about what is a good combination, because scheduling is based on requests only. Okay, so to summarize our topic today, what did we understand? Where is the waste? And in the end, where is the potential in automation and how it can help us? So firstly, we have to avoid vast over provisioning, mainly because it makes no sense. We have a big headroom, mainly because we have chosen the wrong instance type. Second, we need to optimize our applications using workload autoscalers like VPA, HPA, and of course, use the right amount of requests to be optimal and not have big overhead on a different layer. And finally, consider spot and consider it carefully. Where can I use this? Let's benefit from this surplus of compute. So either make or refactor your application to tolerate interruptions. So that begs the question, no? So how can Cast AI optimize your cluster? So Cast AI is a cloud cost optimization platform that analyzes, automates, and optimizes Kubernetes workloads across AWS, GCP, and Azure. So it's a multi-cloud platform. It provides real-time AI-driven decision-making to reduce cloud costs while improving efficiency. So it optimizes your cluster in three ways. So to automate cost reduction, intelligent auto scaling, and multi-cloud optimization. So maybe we can quickly have a look sa platform. Right. So this is a demo cluster or demo from Cast AI themselves. So from the landing page, you can immediately see the usage of your CPU. Where does it sit? How much does it cost you currently? So let's try. How do you connect your cluster to Cast AI? Is actually quite easy. So just need a curl command to download the configuration, and you can directly apply it. So it can support different cluster types like in AKS, or if you have it on premises. And if you try to look at this demo cluster, so Cast AI has maybe it's easier if I mirror na lang. Is that better? Right. So, okay. So, immediately we can see yung ROI ng paggamit ng Cast AI within our ano. So, let's say I turn everything off. Cast AI's bin packing solution can immediately save us up to 57% on running our clusters in the cloud. So there are other preferences here. So for example, if we want to consider right-sizing it using different instances or instance types, maybe we can consider a different pricing model like use spot instances. And of course, it allows us to choose kung ano yung tamang workload for this one. Maybe use Graviton, or maybe for non-production environments, schedule your cluster, like run it 75 hours on a weekly basis lang. So it can give us up to 94% savings, meaning for that. And installing Cast AI is free if you want to analyze your cluster workloads. And if you have any other questions around it, feel free to reach out to me later. But let's get back uh, to the presentation, as I would like to tell you about CloudBridge. So why CloudBridge for Cast AI and Kubernetes? So we've discussed this topic about automation, and we introduced Cast AI in that mix. So I hope you're still with me, no? But as I've mentioned, we've partnered with Cast AI to deliver this talk to you. And as part of our goals to bring value to the table for Kubernetes users like you, is answering why CloudBridge. So before I answer that very quickly, I'm running out of time. We are an advanced AWS tier partner with certified AWS architects and engineers. Just last year, we have expanded our business in APAC, so Australia, Singapore, and Manila. But before that, our headquarters is in UK. And even before that, we have launched business in UAE and also in South Africa. We provide billing services to our customers, so reaching around 10 million USD in cloud spend across. So it does sound large, but we help our customers reduce cloud spend and unlock the potential of savings through optimization. Migration is our bread and butter, and we have carried out hundreds of these in the past, ranging from small businesses to enterprise to public sector. In 2022 alone, being an AWS partner, we have secured $3 million of funding, customer funding, to help customers deliver their projects. So as an advanced tier AWS partner, we have access to these funding programs from AWS that will help customers to unlock the power of cloud and reduce delivery cost. And then finally, we are also backed by our competency, like map competency, SMB, MSP competency that allows us to access further advanced funding from AWS. So now, how do we position ourselves to customer is really important, no? So we at CloudBridge, our value lies in our passion to solve cloud challenges. We do the heavy lifting. So our team conducts in-depth discoveries and evaluates the right fit solution so that we can avoid all the noise that you have to sift through. So we align to your cloud strategy. So whether running Kubernetes on AWS or anywhere, we present clear, actionable items across that map to your goals. And then finally, we ensure ongoing success. So beyond implementation, we provide continuous support from FinOps to technical optimization to MSP, ensuring that Kubernetes clusters run efficiently today and scale efficiently for tomorrow. And with that said, with CloudBridge and Cast AI, you maximize Kubernetes efficiency, reduce cost, and free up your team to focus on innovation, not infrastructure headaches. Okay, so before I end my presentation, so I would like to mention that if you're interested in testing EKS or any service in AWS, or you would like to POC any technology, so you can reach out to me later in the event, and we can check your eligibility for a $300 AWS credit to use this. So to offset your cost in testing. And we can also offer you our own sandbox credits to power your test in AWS. And with that said, thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, Mark. Thank you again, Mark. So let's stay here for a while. We're just gonna open the floor for some questions. So Please raise your hand na lang. Anybody? I think may dalang goodies si Mark, so.
Yes. Oo.
Any hands? Ayun, here.
Yes. Madali lang yan. Okay.
What's your name? Oh, JP. So,
Hi, thank you for the talk tonight. I'm just wondering lang dun sa Cast AI, like, if we want to implement something in our cluster, how are we going to deal with the concerns with the security and data? So since it's AI, it will consume data from our clusters, right? Okay.
Mark. Yes. So I think Cast AI will only consume your resource data, your metrics, so the usage, the CPU, memory, and those things. It's not going to be consuming any of your application data to drive any scaling decisions. So by default, the agent ni Cast AI is also ensuring encryption in transit. So it's not going to be exposed plainly. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
we have room for one more question. Yeah, okay, sir.
And lower Pangilinan.
Hello,
So
Jomo.
basically, the one that you were discussing a while ago is more relevant to FinOps. So, what would be your guiding principle to provide recommendation on when to optimize aside from the CAS AI that you have presented a while ago?
Right. So, I think a key thing that we need to make sure na enabled sa workloads natin is monitoring. So, let's use default monitoring, for example, in AWS CloudWatch to drive these types of decision. So, for example, if you're using more native infrastructure auto-scaling, you can use predictive scaling policies to drive that. If you don't want to think about how. But ultimately, yeah, monitoring solutions, whichever type of tooling you use, is key to drive that decision for you. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're wrapping up the questions for now, but you can come to Mark later if you have any more questions. Thank you again, Mark.
Thank you.
I hope you learned a lot of things from Mark. Personally, there were some memories coming back, like back-to-back meetings, deciding who will set the request limits in Kubernetes. So some things were very familiar. And we're moving on now to our next speaker. So he's the founder and chief architect of GPA Solutions Experts. And he has been helping customers design, build, and scale system for over 20 years. And in half of those 20, the 10 years he's been working with containers. And during that, he built one of the largest Kubernetes ecosystem in the region. So without further ado, let's welcome JP. Yeah, it's all time ka na. Ay, okay.
Thank you. So, thank you everyone. So it's good to be back here. For those who have not yet, at least for those who are not here during my last talk, so let me just quickly introduce myself. So I'm John Paul Alcala, or JP. So I'm currently the founder and chief architect of my company, GKE Solution Experts. So my company is a solution architecture firm. I have a lot of exes, I mean, ex companies, so including this one. And I've used Kubernetes a lot. I mean, a lot. So, for today's session, so since I only have about roughly 30 minutes, so I'll give a brief background first about admission webhooks. But before I do that, I like to share tidbits of stories. So this story of mine that I'm going to share today tonight is a tale of two config maps. So I don't know who here has ever heard of the AWS auth config map. Anybody here who's familiar with this particular configuration? So this config map is before the EKS access entries became a thing. So anybody here? No? There's one. Okay. So if you know what this is, so you probably know what. So basically, what this is and what this shows you, this is a special config map that is installed in the Cube system namespace. Okay, this tells the cluster, specifically the API server, what nodes are allowed based on their ARN, based on the role. Okay, so if you've done managed node groups or probably Fargate, this is probably not a concern for you guys. But for those who are using custom nodes, especially if you have a lot of customizations, this is something that you have to deal with. Okay, so the reason why I say it's a tale of two config maps, because usually you will have a different config map for your in this case, it's a test environment. So I have one for test and another one for my production environment. They look identical of sorts, except probably for the ARN, for the role ARN. Now, what do you think happens? Takes a while to refresh. What do you think happens if you apply the wrong config map? Anybody has done, have you ever done that? What happened?
It's a problem like if you're not apply, and then I think that's the last thing I remember. And then we revert back and also we have a lot of
So let me tell you guys what exactly happens if you apply the wrong config map to the wrong cluster. What happens is that because your nodes, your worker nodes, have a specific ARN, role ARN associated with them, since you applied the wrong config map and therefore the cluster or the API server now sees that, hey, I'm supposed to recognize this other ARN, all of your existing worker nodes are immediately cut off from the API server. And once that happens, you basically have downtime. That happened to me, that happened to my team 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? Probably 2 years ago at this point. Was it 3? Wait, sorry. No, it happened back in, when was pandemic, 2021? But it happened around roughly September or October 2021. I have a 1,000 node cluster. One of my DevOps guys applied the UAT config map into the production one accidentally. So that's one of the dangers of dealing with multiple clusters with a single machine, and you rely heavily on kubectl. Then you just change your configs on the fly. So he accidentally applied it on the production environment. That caused several hours of downtime and SOS from AWS. We had to ask AWS for help. So what's the lesson there? You could have prevented this actually. Back then, if we knew what we know now, we could have prevented that from happening. Okay? That's why this particular talk is about admission webhooks. This is going to be your best friend whenever you're dealing with Kubernetes. Okay? Why? As a DevOps guy, you're dealing primarily with automation. one of the things that you want to automate is, are you applying the right configs into the right environment? Are you applying the right policies? Are you checking the security of your pods? Are you applying the right not just configurations, policies, audits? Are you doing all of that? So once you get to a certain either size, scale, or operational complexity, you will need the help of webhooks. It will not be feasible for you to audit every single one. So imagine trying to audit 300 workloads. 300 workloads that has one service, one deployment, one config map, and probably one secret. So 300 times 4, that's 1,200 configurations. If you have a team like mine, which was only composed of 5 people, I only had five DevOps guys, including me. You cannot audit every single one of them. Okay. So that's why automation will be your best friend. And one of those tools at your disposal, and the nice thing about Kubernetes is it's so extensible. And one of the ways to extend the functionality of a Kubernetes cluster is through additional webhooks. Okay, so but what are they? What is additional webhooks really? So basically, it takes a while to refresh. Well, I wonder why. Anyway, let's just wait for it to come on. Hello. Oh, it really takes a while to refresh. So basically, admission webhooks are nothing more than HTTP callbacks. So they are small web applications running inside your cluster, can run inside, can run outside, depending on what you want. Most of the time it will run inside. So we have used Istio. For those who are using Istio, if you're wondering how that endpoint proxy is being inserted to your deployment, it's actually through admission webhooks. So they're callbacks. So you register your application, your callback into the cluster, and then whenever there's an admission, whenever you try to apply a certain operation, whether it's create, update, delete of any resource, this will be called as part of its life cycle. So admission webhooks are 2 types. There's the validating webhook, which is used for validation, validating configurations, and then the mutating admission webhook, which is used for modifying whatever you're trying to apply. Later, I will show you a demo of something as a very short demo of these 2 in action. Okay, that's running off of my local machine. So webhooks, if you want to take advantage of it, let's see. Hello, why are you taking so long to load? So for you to be able to take advantage of webhooks, actually the webhooks are part of the admission controllers. Okay, so it's one of the admission controller chain. So if you're not familiar with admission controllers, there are a lot of them. So that controls things like the admission webhooks, the authorization policies, the node policies, and so on and so forth. So these are the things that usually you don't care nowadays because they're defaults for it. But if you wait, let me try to just change the. Okay, there we go. So normally these are the things that you don't care anymore because they're usually enabled for by default. But if you are setting up a cluster on premise and you have to start from scratch, usually you will need to take a look at what is enabled. So for you to take advantage of the validating and mutating webhooks, they have to be enabled at the admission controller. Okay. So this is the particular, these are the phases of the, whenever you try to do a kubectl create or kubectl apply or kubectl delete. So basically what happens is that you're making an API request, it will be authenticated first, and then it will pass through the mutating admission. The mutating admission will call on the appropriate webhooks. So after it's mutated, we'll now pass it through validation, The final one, that's the only time it will be validated to see if it's conformant to whatever you apply or not. And then finally, it's persisted to the data store and then applied to the cluster. Okay. Right. Okay. So use cases. So what can we automate? So one is that you can ensure configurations are applied to the correct environment. So you can set up some guardrails or some detectors, like for example, labels. Just making sure that your configs are properly labeled so that they are only applied to that particular environment. If, for example, you need to check the presence of mandatory configuration, so if you are requiring certain labels, for example, to be present in a cluster, or if you need to apply certain pod policies or certain things in a config map, you need to inspect that. You can check that at the validating webhook. You can even use the validating webhook to apply mandatory labels so that your developers don't need to worry about, okay, I need to put this every single label in 300 configuration files. So you can apply them instead for via the validating webhook. You can improve the traceability and accountability by recording who applied and when. So for example, you can create a last updated by, and then who was the one who updated the config. You can create that using, for example, the validating webhook. You can, if you have custom pod distribution policies that you enforce as part of your or as part of your design, you can do so. You can also, so this Istio actually likes, Istio actually implements the sidecars through mutating webhooks. Then finally, of course, security audits. So if you need to apply or if you need to perform, if you're working with your security team and they want to be able to check the configs, are they in a good place? For example, they don't want anyone putting in or hard coding to call this secrets. They have to be declared as a secret rather than declared as a as an environment variable inside your deployment definition. You can check, do that via the validating webhook. Okay. So there are a few caveats you need to understand when you want to take advantage of the webhooks. So number one is that there is no order in terms of the way they are called. So if you have 5 mutating webhooks, you can guarantee that they will be called in order or in alphabetical or whatever. They'll be called at random. Okay. So second, the webhooks, especially the mutating one, must be idempotent. Because again, execution order is not guaranteed, and there may be times that a webhook may be double called. That's why you have to ensure that they are idempotent. And lastly, if you hate working with TLS, you are required pretty much most of the time to use TLS. That's why it's best used with TLS. There are other ways if you don't want to use TLS, but that requires changes at the API server, if I recall correctly. Okay? So to avoid the hassle, just use TLS. Okay? Here is a quick recipe of what you need to prepare in order to create admission webhooks. So, of course, you need your service, you need a deployment, because you need to create your mini API or program. Okay. And then you need to create the validating webhook configuration and or the mutating webhook config, depending on which one you need or if you need both. Okay. Now, you also need a TLS certificate. So ideally, you have a private CA for it. So if you're not familiar with dealing with private CAs, the easiest way to create one is use EasyRSA. Okay? So EasyRSA, you can just search for it online. It's downloadable, and then you just need OpenSSL installed. Okay, and basically a script that will create certificate authority for you, and then it can issue server certificates. So you will need one. Otherwise, you will need to use self-signed certificates. Technically, ECRSA is also self-signed, but at least you can create a public infrastructure from it. Okay, and usually you will need one. Okay, and then finally, you have to create a secret containing the TLS certificate and the private key that will be generated from your private CA. Now, actually, a Kubernetes, so probably some of you are wondering, can't I use there's a feature inside Kubernetes wherein the cluster itself can actually issue a TLS certificate. Technically, you can use that, but it requires additional config, which is why for this particular demo, what I'll show you is a static one, which uses ECRSA instead, because it's simpler. Okay. But if you want it to be dynamically provisioned for you, technically you can, with a few caveats, of course. So without further ado, let me jump quickly to a quick demo. So, okay. I have here a config map for an Nginx. So for my particular demo, I will show you how it's done using config maps only. Okay? Simply because I started off my story with config maps, so might as well my demo is on config maps. But actually, mutating and validating webhooks can be used in practically any Kubernetes resource. Okay, so deployments, pods, config maps, secrets, you name it. Anything that you can list in kubectl in this one. This one. So practically everything that is listed in the first column is supported, pretty much. Okay. So, but in this particular demo, I just restricted it to config maps to keep it simple and keep it quick. Okay. So let me walk you through, guys, first with the config with the components of the webhook. Okay. So I have a webhook here. So this one I wrote in, no, not that one. I wrote this in Flask. This is just a simple, I just have two endpoints. One is /validate, the other one is /mutate. So I'll walk you through the entire code. But basically what each one does, so validate, what it does is it looks for a label called environment, and the value of that label must be demo. Okay. So if allowed, okay. If not, there's a message. Okay. The mutating webhook, on the other hand, is a little bit more complex. As it already called, yeah, okay. It's a little bit more complex because what it does is it applies certain mandatory labels, and then it also applies certain labels as well. And then there's also the ability to, let's say, I want to not apply those labels at all. Okay. Can you guys hear me if I don't use the mic? Okay. Because I need my two hands, like this one. Everybody can read what's on my screen. Is it readable enough? Okay. So let's start off with, I'm going to create the namespace for my demo, which is config namespace. Okay. So I have a namespace that's called demo. If you're wondering, I never use the default namespace. Never. Okay. There's a historical reason for that. Anyway, so I have a few config artifacts for my webhook. As I said, I need the secrets because I need the TLS certificates for it. So this is once you've generated your TLS certificate and your CA certificate, just you can easily create this using kubectl. Okay. And then I have, of course, this is your run-of-the-mill service and deployment. Very, very simple, except of course this one, which if you notice, I'm running Unicorn for the Pythonistas out there. I'm basically having Unicorn serve as both the web server and as the TLS endpoint, so that I don't need to run a separate web server anymore. Okay. And then lastly, I have my webhook. So I have two webhook configurations. One is for the validating webhook and the other is for the mutating webhook. So if we look at them, they're roughly the same. Okay. They're roughly the same. So I've registered it in such a way that it will only apply on namespaces that have an environment label and it has a value of demo. So which means that once I apply this webhook, it will not scan any other namespaces apart from the namespace that I have this label and this value. Okay? So that means it will not, if I try to deploy something into Cube system, it will not pass through here. Okay. I've also restricted the resources to only config maps. I don't care about the API versions. I only care about the create and update operations because I only use, whenever I apply configs, I only use kubectl apply. Okay. Again, there are reasons why. And if you're managing clusters and managing workloads, forget about the create. Just use apply. Anyway, client config, this tells the admission controller what's the service name. Why is it not scrolled? Okay, it's scrolled already. Okay. There's a it tells you, okay, this is the name of the service, this is the namespace, this is the path. And if you notice, I have a CA bundle. So this is why it is recommended to have a public key infrastructure because you will need a root CA at the minimum. So because I used EasyRSA to generate that for me, this is the CA certificate in base64 encoded. Right? So it's the same in both the validating and the mutating. Okay? So let's do this. -n cube-system apply-f configs webhook. Okay. So my webhook is actually deployed inside Cube system for security reasons because if I'm going to see, I usually like simulating in production environment. So if I do this in a production environment, I will never deploy critical components outside of Cube system because I do not want developers to be touching the Cube system namespace. So Cube system get mod. So my admission demo is already running. Okay. Now let me try to apply my simple config map. Okay. This is my simple config map. -n demo apply-f configs sample. So if you notice, it just got created like normal, right? Nothing fancy. So if I want to check what's inside there, demo get config maps nginx default --o YAML. So this is the generated YAML. If you notice that I have these labels already applied. Okay. They're already applied. One of them is the updated by. So this one is based on my machine. So whenever I do kubectl, it actually records who's applying. Okay, you can actually capture that. And I'm recording who's applying that via via the mutating webhook. And then last updated, this is in Unix timestamp. So I'm actually recording who the hell is applying things to my cluster. Okay, so this is for traceability and auditability purposes. Now, as I said, one of the things about my webhook is that one thing that it did not do for me. So if you notice, it just let the whole thing go through, right? And the reason why is because I did not include in the I included in the webhook here the environment. Okay. Sorry, I made a mistake, but okay, it's fine. The validation is only applied when the label is there. So what I'll do, I'll go here, I will uncomment. Oops, sorry. Oops, sorry. Okay. Labels. Assignment. Then so now my get ns minus o YAML, my namespace, which is just my namespace has the label demo now. If I try to, I will delete first the -n demo delete -f configs sample. Okay, then apply. Oh, telling me nope, not allowed. Why? Because because my label does not contain the environment. Okay, so if I enable that now, then I apply it again, it's created. If I get config map, it's there. Okay. Now, what if I don't want the mandatory? I don't want the other stuff, or the other labels. So I'll just uncomment this. So part of my code says if there's a label called no extra labels and it's set to true, and then you try to apply it again, what you get now is a trimmed down version of the labels. So basically, I can just check, okay, does this particular config map have the parameters I need? So, okay, do something. If not, do something else. So in this case, because I added that particular label, it removed the mandatory labels. And then it removed the extra labels. It only retained the mandatory ones. The mandatory is the last updated and updated one. But the rest is vanilla. Okay. So that's a very simple and short demo of config maps. You can really use this to your advantage because there are a lot of things that you can do whenever you have things like, for example, audit. You can do audit. You want to have a security pipeline inside your admission controllers. You want to ensure that everything that's applied has the right. Like, for example, the resource limits earlier that was presented. If you want to enforce that there's a certain gap or there's a certain range only that you can allow or you can tolerate. For example, 10% only. The limit is only 10% above the request. You can check that at the validating webhook. Okay, so that you can enforce it without you auditing it every. So that's it. That's it for my demo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JP. we will be opening the floor again for questions. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand and I'll come to you.
There's one there.
Hi, good evening po. I'm Andrea. I was just wondering, how can mutating admission webhook can ensure that when it's injecting dynamically to a sidecar container, na ensure niya na there's no availability or latency issues?
Sorry, what do you mean by latency? Latency in what?
Latency issues like sige, availability na available pa rin yung data from the mutating admission webhook na i-inject sa sidecar containers.
Okay, so what is that? So actually, I did not show much of the code right there, but if maybe I can just show it. No, I'll just explain quickly now. Basically, what as part of the mutating, one of the things that you have to do, you just create or modify the entire payload or the entire content. You have to actually issue what's called the JSON patch. So JSON patch is actually an internet standard for specifying patches for JSON objects. So there's a complete standard to it. In my case, in my code, I actually use a library called JSON patch.
Oh, so it has to be incorporated po.
Yes.
Okay.
So that way, it knows what to add to the configuration and what to do. So that, if, for example, in your case, if you have issue, there's a sidecar for endpoint. By creating a JSON patch, you don't necessarily need to be the sidecar for endpoint.
Yeah.
Unless you're taking webhook, it's purpose to remove unnecessary sidecar.
Thank you so much.
Later mo na lang.
Any more questions?
Nobody knew at that time what the problem was when that happened. So basically the symptom was all of the nodes started deregistering from the cluster. Then I have 1,000 nodes registered that cluster. All of them started falling out. They're still up, they're still alive. Some of them are still servicing traffic, but the cluster is basically offline. Okay. It took a while, it took several hours, and escalation even to Seattle, because we had to get technical service over there at that time. So just to be able to identify the problem. So, but at that time we didn't know that that actually was a problem. The only time we knew that it became a problem was when the DevOps guy actually admitted that I applied the wrong term. Thankfully his job is safe. Was not fired. He's still there in the company. But it takes guts to admit. So it takes guts to admit that you're wrong. As I used to tell my guys all the time, It's okay to make mistakes, just not too expensive. Not too expensive. So yeah, that's how we were able to finally know correlate, okay, what caused the problem, and then at the same time, the guy who actually applied the wrong config admitted that I made a mistake. Because this is what happened, and then at the same time, by the time the service team came, they were able to say that, hey, that was the.
Raising at that, all without your letting,
The guy panicked, to be honest. The guy panicked, and the guy was already feeling that he might lose his job. So that's why we didn't admit immediately. It was several hours later when we found out, and when he said that, okay, I need a mistake.
so you didn't know who was executing.
Yeah, but we had to ask AWS, okay, who was it that applied it? Because on their side, they can actually check. And for you to be able to get to that point, it needs one error escalation.
Yun. So if there's no more questions, we're gonna be let's first take GP again for that wonderful talk. Thank you, GP. And make sure lang na you guys have registered earlier. So we're gonna be proceeding with our quiz for tonight. There will be prizes and may announcement lang earlier na may nanalo daw dito for the raffle. What's his name again? Who's Baron Joshua Volante? First. Baron Joshua Volante. You won the 1 year subscription for COVID now. So, please reach out na lang to us later. Ayun, make sure na registered kayo and you can actually, pwede na pag make QR. Ayun, can you guys see the link? Ayan. So you can start connecting using your phones now kasi mag-load pa and login and stuff. We'll give you a few time to log in.
Yes. I don't think they have the Wi-Fi, so
Oh yeah, I'll visit.
yeah.
Okay. You can look at the password for the Wi-Fi at your back. If you don't have the data connection.
Six months, okay. I think, yeah. Kasi,
Hindi ko kasi alam kung may pinatanggal siya.
Ayun. So if you're still logging in, please raise your hand lang. Just so we know we still need to wait. Ayun, okay. There's some more.
Top 6. Yung 7
So
to 10.
while you're logging in, same pa rin yung mga prices natin. So the top 3 will be receiving 6 months of cloud subscription. Tapos yung top 4 to 6 will be receiving 50% off for Kubernetes exams.
Tapos yung ano daw, yung 7 to 10, may swag slip yung may guys.
Saan ka?
May swag slip pa kami.
From Cloud. As yung top 7 to 10 will also receive some swags from our sponsor, CloudReach.
Okay na yung link lang na ganyan. Hindi ko pa na-try yan.
Is the link working for you guys? So, I'll be introducing one of our leads here. This is Lance. He will be facilitating this quiz for you. So, here's Lance.
It's working. So it's working. Hello. Guys, let me know if you guys have already troubles accessing the link so that we can assist you and give you more time. Thank you. So who here has raised a hand na siguro yung may issues with the link? So far, everyone has been able to connect naman. Alright, sige. Is it okay? Alright, so any moment now, we'll guys start the quiz and make sure to be ready on your end. So here's the quiz. Okay, a bit of a technical difficulty earlier. So you guys could just scan the QR code pala. Apologies for that. Alternatively, you could also, if you have trouble scanning the QR, you could also type in the quiz code above. So that you can also access it.
Just a reminder lang din, the quiz is feel free to answer as fast as you can. You don't need to wait for us to finish reading the question kasi the time you answer the question has a factor in your score.
Yep, that means if you were able to answer a certain question faster than other people, even though if you get the correct answer, you would achieve more points. Kaya not only the correct answer, but speed also matters.
And then 30 seconds. Hindi ko yata natanggal.
30 seconds yung time. I think okay yun eh, kasi yung ibang question is a bit too long.
Minutes. Kung hindi yung sagot nila. Sorry.
All right, so is everyone able now to access the quiz? Is someone having some sort of technical difficulties? Please raise your hand so we can assist you. Okay, there's one people there. Sige, we'll give you more time to access.
Right? So, FYI, hindi pa nag-umpisa yung quiz. And wala kayo nakikita questions. Just wait lang. So, who again has here some sort of an issues? Can you raise your hand so we can monitor?
Okay na on that end.
This end, are you guys okay?
All right, it seems like everybody is already ready. So without further ado, we're going to be starting our quiz. Okay, question number 1. So what is the main advantage of using Kubernetes automations for DevOps teams? So it was discussed by the first speaker kanina. So it eliminates the need for monitoring, reduces human intervention, prevents system failures, or does it remove the need for cloud computing in general? All right, the correct answer is it reduces the human intervention and enhances efficiency. So far, 89% of you got the correct answer. So one participant skipped, I'm not sure if that's internet issues, but bawin na lang sa next round. All right, next question. So what is the best way to handle workload migration in Kubernetes? So we manually move the workloads using command lines. So use bin packaging and workload balancing, avoid workload migrations altogether, or do we just run all workloads on an on-demand instance to prevent movement? All right, the correct answer is to use bin packaging and workload balancing automation. So 52 participants were able to get it correctly, so congratulations. All right, proceeding to the next question. Which of the following is not a recommended best practice for Kubernetes scaling? So using both HPA and DPA together with the proper context, combining HPA and cluster autoscaler for optimized scaling, using observability tools to monitor resource consumption, or is it optimizing resource requests and limits for better cost efficiency? All right, so a lot of you got that correct also. So it's using both HPA and DPA without proper configuration. So before we proceed to the next question, tingnan muna natin yung leaderboard for the first three questions. So far naman muna si Jonald Tenio. Who's Jonald Tenio by the way? Hindi ko ba siya? Baka chat GPT ka. And also John Kubernetes. Ito pag natalo si John Kubernetes. I don't know. Kubernetes na yung apelyado niya. So, okay, all right, let's proceed to the next question. So, question number 4. So, what is the key differences between horizontal pod autoscaler and vertical pod autoscaler? So, HPA adjusts resource limits while VPA adjusts pod numbers. HPA scales pod horizontally while VPA scales them vertically. HPA is used for databases and while VPA is used for web applications, or HPA only works in the cloud while VPA works on premises. The correct answer is HPA scales pod horizontally while VPA scales them vertically. I mean, it's in the name itself, right? So it's been self-explanatory. So congratulations for the 57 participants who were able to get it correctly. So let's proceed to the next question. So how can teams effectively reduce cloud costs when running Kubernetes? So over-provision resource to prevent scaling issues, avoid using auto-scaling features in general, use spot instances for workloads that can tolerate interruptions, or we run Kubernetes on our private servers. Take note of the term reduce cloud costs. All right, the correct answer is to use spot instances for workloads that can tolerate interruptions. So 57 participants were able to get it correctly. So far consistent yung participants. So congratulations for that. And we've finished half of the quiz and let's proceed to the sixth question. So what role does GitOps play in Kubernetes automation? So it eliminates the need for CI/CD, replaces Kubernetes dashboards. It ensures infrastructure changes are version controlled and enforces applications to be containerized. So for sure, so those who use this Git will have some familiarity with the answer to this. All right, it ensures infrastructure changes are version controlled and automated. So for sure, someone who get ng CI/CD pipelines, they deal with this kinds of issues every day. So before we proceed to the next question, let's first go back to the leaderboards. So, sino mga ba yung nangunguna today? Wait, sino number one? Oh, it's still John. I'll tell you. Wait, alam si Kubernetes. But now, nawala ka. Sino ba yun? Sino si John Kubernetes kanina? Ayun. Ayun. Wala si Kubernetes. So, si MCC and then si so, as you can see, pareho sila ng score, no? But siguro mas mabilis yung kamay ni John Antonio to capture the first answer to the question. So, speed also matters. So, you guys could definitely still catch up. So, let's proceed to the next question. Question number 7 is, which Kubernetes feature allows workloads to automatically scale based on CPU or memory usage? So GitOps, VPA, Cluster Autoscaler, and HPA. Medyo confusing si CPU na. Alright, horizontal part of meron gawa niyo ng nag-regret siya na vertical na dapat. So tama yung sagot. Okay. Ayun. So, parang HPA or VBA. So, congratulations to the participants. So, 24 participants. And looking at the leaderboard, ay, bumalik na sa top 10 si Kubernetes. Congratulations. And someone was able to outposition si Jonathan. Congratulations kay Twinkle. So we still have 3 more questions, so there's still to catch up. All right, next question. So why is improper instance type selection in cloud environments a problem? So it increases cloud costs due to inefficient resource utilization, prevents Kubernetes from functioning, makes cloud providers charge extra fees, or doesn't eliminate the need for auto-scaling. So kanina in-announced that there were 625 instance types in AP Southeast Asia, sa Singapore alone, no? So why do we pick certain instances? So the reason is it increases cloud costs due to inefficient resource utilization. So for 58 was able to get the correct answer. So congratulations to the 58. So on to the last 2 questions. All right, what is the major risk of using spot instances in Kubernetes? So do they have unpredictable costs? They can be terminated by cloud providers with little notice. They require manual configuration before use, or they cannot be used with autoscalers. So obviously, they can be terminated by cloud providers with little notice. So that's why it's much cheaper because sometimes nire-reclaim siya ng AWS and you're renting it to other people. So the correct answer is can be terminated by cloud providers. So congratulations to the 46 participants. So before we proceed to the last question, let's go back to our leaderboard. So far, nawala ulit si Kubernetes, but I see na bumalik si Jonathan Tenyo. And still Twinkle, Morit, and JR. So far, wala pa silang mali. So congratulations. And for the last question, we'll determine the winners. So last question, how does Kubernetes Cluster Autoscaler optimize infrastructure? By manually adjusting the number of nodes, by automatically adding or removing nodes based on demand, by enforcing fixed server usage, or by limiting CPU usage to a predefined threshold. All right, so sa 1 million pesos, but automatically adding or removing nodes based on demand. So that's it. Congratulations. So we now have our winners. So tignan natin yung winners. So, sige, and his name. Ay, baka wala yung ano, hindi ko siya mawala. So our winner is for the sige ano natin from top 10 natin since that's an award. So for the number 10 si MCC. So who's MCC by the way? Proceed na lang sa harap na for that you can be recognized. So si number 1 is si Nadine. Also please proceed forward Nadine. O mamaya si ChatGPT pala isa doon. Si Lan. Si Sir JP, I think si Sir JP. JP Adriano, I proceed forward. Si Joshua, si Faith, Jonathan, Mark, Kubernetes, ay hindi si Kubernetes. si Twinkle, so, a picture. Ayan. So, sino si Twinkle sa inyo?
Dito pa.
Who's Twinkle? Ayan, congratulations. So, these are the winners of our quiz. Again, just to reiterate, the first 3 will have 6 months cloud access subscription. The 4 to 6 will receive 50% off for the Kubernetes exam. And then from the 7 to 10 will receive swags from our sponsor. So, let us give a round of applause to our winners, and thank you guys for participating. I see. Since it's your quiz, I will also, I'll take over from this point. So, ikaw na ba? Ay, ikaw na, hindi ko alam yung sabihin. Hindi ko alam yung sabihin. Once again, we would like to thank each and every one of you guys for coming in our 4th meetup. So thank you very much. And just to give a bit of a good news, especially those sa mga natalo, no? Baka umuwi na kayo. We actually have dinner from our sponsors this night. So at a certain extent, you still have some sort of a consolation. So you could stay and network with other people, maybe talk about different passion of Kubernetes that you guys have. And just to close the event, we would just like to thank our sponsor and speakers, Sir JP, and what's the name of the other?
Mark Cahinde.
And Sir Mark Cahinde for being our speakers today and sponsoring the event. And of course, AWS for always being our partner in these kinds of tech community events. So once again, thank you very much, guys.
Winner.
You take
Claim. Ayun, sa labas. Pero claim yung ano.
For the winners pala, you could proceed to us so that you can claim your awards, especially yung mga may swags. The 7 to 10. Okay. And we are also guys requesting for others to maybe we could take a group picture sa AWS symbol sa AWS logo sa labas. So we could just document the entire event. Again, thank you very much guys for attending. Okay.
Sayang. Sabi ko salang malikot. Nalito ako sa HK. Nalito ako. Sa akin yung yung sa spot instances kung nalito ako tini-terminate pala ni cloud provider. Sa akin kasi yung yung sa ko sa. Isa kasi HK lang sabi ko. Tingnan sa napakadali lang.